one of the things that Kirti and Partha talked about was the fact that Aruba Central has really become the center of the Aruba universe. A lot of the disparate tools that kind of existed on their own little island are now being centralized and running into the platform. Aruba Central is going to be a big component of AOS 10. There's a lot that's going to be done there. But at the same time, it's a lot of things that we really wished we could have tied together in the past. I mean, things like Net Insights, things, are providing analytics now that we're using Edge as the sensor, those kinds of things. So that's going to mean the cloud. And the cloud, as Partha kind of pointed out during the Q&A yesterday, the cloud really means limitless scalability as much as you're willing to go. It means resilience if you build things right, but it also means that they can turn on additional features. I mean, I can think of several times when they're like, yeah, you really can't run that feature in here because you don't have enough horsepower on your servers. And now with the cloud, with the software as a service model, yeah, turn it all on. We don't care. You bought a license for it, fire it up. With Aruba being a presenter at Cloud Field Day 8 coming up next month, we're probably about 3 to 4 weeks out from that right now. What are your thoughts on how Aruba is making this transition to the cloud with AOS 10 and a software as a service model? I mean, I know there's some bad blood in the wireless community when we talk about cloud controllers and cloudy this and on-premises that. But I think we're past that now. I think that the way the landscape looks now, it's a much different picture. So who wants to get all cloudy?
I'll take a stab leading off. I think there's a couple of things that probably compelled Aruba to go this direction. One is if they're going to do ML and AI, whatever AI means, you're going to build gigantic data sets and need a lot of processing power. And so, yes, cloud is a place to do that. And they're talking about features like having these peer groups where they can say, hospitals look like this, and so we want to configure your network like this because that's how your peers are doing. You need the cloud for that. The second thing is from a business perspective, publicly traded companies, those overlords like to see that regular renewable income coming from software subscriptions, and so from the business side, that fits into that trend nicely as well. So two compelling reasons for Aruba to go this way.
Okay, that's fair.
Plus, I'll start out and throw out that crazy word licensing. You started with the preface that, oh yeah, you have a license, it's on the cloud, it's all there. What it does, it also allows you to nitpick and hit every little thing has its separate license. And then there's even a licensing server that controls all the other licensing, and you need a license for that. So I see the licensing part of our jobs getting more and more complex, whereas the cloud pieces could make our life easier, and in some senses do, but we have to look at the overall cost as well. And though Drew is right, there is a huge push for that recurring revenue. Some of our customers have more Capex than opex and have difficulty coming up with all of the things that happen on a recurring basis.
I do want to touch on that point real quickly, Keith, because that's been a huge discussion when we come to cloud. Oh, I have all of this budget that's allocated for Capex. There's no way I could move to the cloud. And a lot of organizations are starting to cut back on their Capex budgets basically for OpEx reasons. They're like, well, wait a minute. Why would I spend, $1 million for the next 5 years to have old hardware in 5 years when I can amortize $1 million over the next 5 years and get constant refreshes, constant software updates, and basically have a better solution? So, I mean, do we really feel like...
I don't disagree with you. I just see there's a lot of older or more government-based organizations that have done it this way for the last decades, many, many decades, and then they have to readjust. Even in K-12 markets where they have money coming in from the government, it's limited to what you can use it for. You can only use it for certain things. So if that's your budgeting cycle or that's how you've been doing it, yeah, I mean, we can look at companies like Adobe who have been able to make that jump from a Capex to OpEx model 100%, and a lot of people follow along. So I agree with you. There are companies that need to move that direction. We just need to get them to help think that way and think more of what is it long term rather than just the old-fashioned OpEx, Capex, and they fight against each other.
Well, and I would say coming from the VAR side, we see that a lot. And, it is obviously, hey, I've got all of this Capex, not the OpEx. And so we can work with the vendors and do, multi-year where they're only paying it once every 5 years or once every 7 years or whatever, which falls into their Capex cycle then. And it's not a recurring yearly or recurring quarterly, to get it out of that opex model. And there's definitely a lot of that out there and a lot of that happening today.
I think one of the problems that a lot of companies and a lot of customers are going to run into is that even those that, so for example, I work for a government organization like Keith was talking about, and we actually run more opex. We lease the majority of our equipment. But it's also with the understanding that at the end of that lease, if something is going on where, suddenly Corona shuts down, a lot of companies, and suddenly we're looking at a hugely reduced tax revenue and largely reduced budgets, it's with this idea of we can either A, buy it out and keep using it, or B, we can go month to month or extend it another year, things along those lines, right? All of those little things that you can kind of do. Well, the problem is if the subscription expires, now you're locked into a situation where you can't use the product anymore. There's no way of using that product, and so that's kind of the heartburn I think that a lot of customers are coming up on is, but what if, right? And the cost, it's always in every experience I've seen, at least, it's been a cost increase, right? So you're getting some new features, and those new features are important, but it's a significant cost increase. The hardware isn't getting any cheaper, but the licensing and the subscription service is much cheaper. So there is actually quite a bit of heartburn that's being had from the customer side of this. Because they realize that they're putting on those handcuffs, and many of them have had poor experiences when they've put those handcuffs on from other companies. Licensing maybe an office suite or desktop software, things along those lines. They realize exactly how much trouble they're in when that company decides that they're going to just suddenly increase cost or something along those lines, and they don't have a choice now.
Well, let's look at the bigger picture. You guys have definitely had there's some heartbroken love quarrels with licensing and purchasing stuff going on down here, I can tell. But I think the big picture is, kind of back to what Drew was saying with, and Tom, as you posed the question with what can we do in the cloud? I think historically, kind of up until just recently with the past couple of manufacturer changes, when we were paying for things in the cloud, we were basically paying more in a subscription model for a subset of features we had with an on-premises controller in the environment. So maybe it was less complex and it was a pretty GUI, but we weren't really getting a lot out of it besides that. And now, with the things we've seen from Aruba in the past few days, with that machine learning, with that intelligence, with those workflows, we're actually getting value from the cloud with things like the tuning and automation. And I think it'll take us a little bit to quantify this, but we can certainly take a qualitative look at it and say, we're going to be spending less in terms of resources, right? We're automating things that people can do. Less resources, less people, less man hours on these more mundane things. So there's a direct resource cost, but there's also an opportunity cost with your top talent being tied up, just kind of keeping the wheels greased. So when people like us and you guys are suddenly freed up to go do more creative things, I hate saying digital transformation, but it's a thing, changing substantially how we use technology in a business to get us ahead, whether it's government or private sector. I think that's huge. And I think what we're doing is we're saying we're going to invest in ourselves as an organization. We're going to offload some of this stuff. We're going to take advantage of this intelligence, and we're going to realize and recoup that opportunity cost to do other business objectives.
To be fair, I think you're absolutely right, JJ, because one of the problems that we see, and not just with wireless and not just with control software, but cloud apps in general, Stage one is get the old thing working in the cloud, whatever it takes. And we usually end up losing functionality when we do that. And that's across the board. Stage two is the refactoring of the application to take advantage of what cloud offers us. And I think that that's usually where things start falling down, because companies don't want to pay 2x for 95% of the same functionality. What they want is to pay, I don't know, maybe 1.5x, but get like 10x capability. And that's where we have to do a better job of communicating. And I mean, this is one of the things that a lot of people honestly have been asking since the last Aruba Atmosphere. Okay, this is great and all, but where is it headed? And I think that you can, of course, hindsight is always, I won't say it, but it's 2020. Hindsight tells us that this was the path we were headed down. We just had to wait for things to catch up to get there. I mean, when you look at all of the things that people have been working on, it's always been working towards this model of harnessing the power of the cloud to be able to deliver better software functionality, since the radios, aside from the odd FCC ruling that we can now use 6 gigahertz, the radios have been steadily getting better, but not like leaps and bounds better. Wow. I shut the room up with that one.
An AP is an AP.
Well, yeah, that's true. But, you know, a phone is a phone until it becomes an iPhone, and then it becomes a pocket computer.
I don't know, Tom. I'm going to have to totally disagree with you there. You just said
Okay.
iPhone. If we go back to the first iPhone, to the iPhone 11s we have today, the radios are substantially better, orders of magnitude faster, quicker, better on all levels, more robust. Same with APs. Maybe I've just been around too long, but I remember when 1 and 2 meg was as good as we could get. And now my computer right now is pushing a little over a gig right here to my desk. So that's a substantial improvement. And I think it goes along with the fact that over the last 10, 15 years, Wi-Fi is now the access layer that everyone uses. So had we not had those improvements, we wouldn't have got that result.
And that's a good point, Keith, because I am currently running the Tech Field Day Roundtable from a wireless laptop connected to my home network across the room from where all of my lovely, safe, beautiful Ethernet cables are sitting over there. But when you think about it, just to prove a point, quantitatively, the iPhone 11 is leaps and bounds better than the original iPhone 1. But when you think about it, is it really that much faster? I mean, yes, if you benchmark the two phones against each other, the number is way higher for the 11. But does it feel faster to you?
Right, your experience is going to be very similar.
Oh yeah, and that's because of software.
GPS
Right.
Now we have Bluetooth. You can go by and have it tied to your watch and go to the store and pay for your stuff all automatically. All of that is because we have radio frequencies and radio capabilities that have now been finally come to fruition. And I think in the future, we can go even more than that.
Yes and no. Having faster radio capabilities, having 4G, LTE, 5G, whatever's going to be in the next phone is great. But I also think that cloud-enabled software makes that possible. Things like Apple Pay don't just work because of faster wireless. They work because someone figured out how to enable cloud payment processing. Uber doesn't work because I'm using Wi-Fi 6. Uber works because there is a database of software that allows me to connect to drivers on the road. Not discounting what you're saying. I think hardware is still very much important because, like you said, when we get to VR, VR isn't going to work if I'm still using 802.11g. And let me just preface that by saying, if any of you out there are watching are still using 802.11g, will you please tweet at me, because I'm going to send one of these people to your house to fix your Wi-Fi problems. But you've got to continually increase that because software isn't getting any smaller. That's one of the things that we talk about all the time. As much as we think, bigger, faster processor, multiple cores, 11 bajillion gigahertz, software is going to just increase to be like, now that I have more cores, I can run all these things simultaneously. So it still feels the same.
I want to get back to the cloud notion and something that JJ brought up around what we're doing with cloud. I feel like when cloud infrastructure as a service first emerged, it was sort of like the benefit was this is cheaper than running your own data center. Look at all this compute you can get for pennies on the dollar versus having to build it and operate it yourself. But over time, we've seen that cloud is in fact not cheaper. It's at least as much and often more expensive. And so for folks like Aruba who are moving to the cloud and others, they have to change the discussion from cost to opportunity. What can I gain by moving to the cloud as opposed to what can I save? And that's why you see them emphasizing things like AI and ML and automation, because there's your opportunity. It's not about how much you're going to pay. It's what can I do better than I was doing before.
It's fair.
Am I the only one, though, that when I equate cloud to a product, I feel like there's less granularity and stuff that I need to potentially adjust or configure, and still paying the high price for these products with quote unquote neutered equipment because it goes into a cute dashboard. I don't know. I mean, am I wrong in thinking that? It seems kind of weird sometimes that we're getting these new features in the cloud, but the equipment then comes out kind of neutered.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to the point earlier where we've all kind of been burned by a vendor or two who has done exactly that. But I do think that there are other examples of the maturity that's taken place there, and that has brought us into a point where we can access all of the important nerd knobs. We can do everything we need to do, whether that's RxSOP or, from a wireless perspective or whatever, right? We're no longer at that point where the cloud is the easy button that, but we can't actually get to what we need for most vendors, at least. So I think there's that aspect, and I think that's kind of maybe goes back to a little bit what JJ was saying too, that we've all kind of been burned, and we're kind of maybe working outside of working from that perception. The other important point here, I think, is that well, you know what? I'm going to go back to what Keith said earlier. Right now, I think a lot of companies do not trust the licensing models because, as Keith said, the problem with this type of solution is there's 20 different SKUs that you have to license. And I'm talking not specifically about Aruba, but I'm talking about across the board, right? There's 20 different SKUs that you have to license that each have their own different their own price, and that price may change, right? So even if you decide to keep the hardware and keep paying for it in 3 years or 5 years, whenever that subscription expires, you now have to figure out, okay, what are the new SKUs and what's that cost going to be now? So I want to go back to that. And maybe ask the question, what is it going to take for us not to be afraid of the handcuffs? What is it going to take so that we can trust that, number one, that we're getting the features that we want, not only now, but new features that will be released, that those are going to be available, and number two, that at the end of the current term of whatever that software is or whatever that licensing is, that we aren't going to find ourselves in a dumpster fire.
I mean, I think the thing is there's always handcuffs, and it's just that, do you want them on your hands or your feet? That's kind of how it's going.
So those become feet cuffs at that point?
leg irons. You get the
Leg irons.
you get the handcuffs or the leg irons.
Well, I mean, I think there's always an option, right? Like even with the Aruba, you can take an AP and you can run it in basically an autonomous mode or a local cluster or whatever you want to do, or you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. But at the end of the day, if a manufacturer says, here's all the shiny things you get by doing it this way, and it's easier because we're going to make it easier for you, you're going to make a choice. Do you want all those shiny features? And I think we're going to go through the evolution where the shiny features are not just shiny, nice to have features. They're going to be things that you're dependent on running your organization with. And we're going to be pointing to the cloud, and maybe not always the cloud. I mean, there's going to be central on-prem, there's all kinds of ways to do it, but that intelligence has to be somewhere, and certainly putting it somewhere that's scalable and flexible and somebody else's stuff somewhere is pretty easy. So, I mean, at the end of the day, there's all, for now, there's going to be a choice. But I think as we move down the road, probably it's going to be the norm. And then that's just going to be business as usual. And nobody's going to stop and think about it. The same way that whoever was talking about the Adobe licenses, we don't really stop and think about that now.
Well, we actually did a great podcast on this a couple of weeks ago. We had some of your wireless brethren, Sam Clements and Lee Badman, come on and basically talk about the fact that, cloud is enabling different licensing models that's a little bit more tied to usability and things like that. And of course, Lee is notorious for being the cantankerous licensing guy across all spectrums. But I think it's a good point to consider is, a lot of what we pay out is not because we don't need the feature. Like I've heard that for years. I have to buy the Enterprise Plus, maximum license in order to get that one little feature that was locked behind there because the department that developed it couldn't find a way to get that paid for a la carte. But with cloud models, we're going to an a la carte thing where it's like, okay, you don't have to buy the Enterprise Plus whiz-bang model. You can buy all of the individual a la carte licenses. Now, you may end up paying more if you need these very well-used features. If you just sign a site license model or a perpetual license model, or God, I'm dating myself with those. But is the key to cloud this idea of, well, it's death by 1,000 cuts if you want a la carte, but we'll throw in the kitchen sink if you just go for the max?
I think it can be solved with a simple licensing issue. The problem is, and this isn't just Aruba, all vendors who go to cloud are thinking, how do we do this? And so they're trying to maximize the revenue. Customers are trying to minimize their expense. And in between, there's some complex cloud algorithm that you have to think through rather than a very simple one. I think Adobe's is successful because they make it really easy for creative people to just have one license. And then if you look at their other individual pieces, if you want any one of two, then it's cheaper to buy the whole thing. So I think we need some level of simplification because, like JJ said, this is the future. We can complain now about it, but this is where it's going to go. So we just need to get used to it.
Just to pipe up on playing devil's advocate here, because I totally feel your pain, and I sit obviously between customers like a lot of my friends down here as a VAR, where one customer is going to say, I don't want to pay for things I don't need. And the next customer is going to say, don't nickel and dime me with all of these things. But I will say, I think they're moving in that direction. So Aruba, I'm going to speak to Aruba specifically. If you look at things like they had these token subscription things in Central that layered on top. So you had the central device management, and then you had these token subscriptions for things like guest, for an engagement feature, and then also for clarity. And now they're kind of collapsing that down. They've taken the clarity token away. That's the AI insights that's just built into the platform now. So I think they're trying to answer that call and move that direction now. Will it be more expensive in the end? Will they do it the right way? And what is the right way based on each customer need? I don't know, but I think that is their thought process.
This is what I think. In 5 years, we're going to take things out of the cloud and we're going to start putting them back into big metal boxes and racks and putting controllers in racks for Wi-Fi and all that stuff. We're going to get rid of this cloud thing. That's what I think.
So that actually brings up a question I kind of have for everybody. I mean, I still get asked regularly about the security, right? Everybody's got private clouds versus public cloud. And there's still customers that are constantly asking about it, though. No matter, I know, I mean, we're past that point, but there's still people asking. I'm putting all of this data out there. Who's to say that it's not accessible to other people in the same instances? I mean, there's still all that going on.
Please just help me here. I always giggle when I hear private cloud, and like, I'm no big cloud expert by any means.
Well, private cloud meaning they have a data center somewhere that they're running all of their own instances of things as a private cloud. It's not Azure, not AWS, whatever. Or they have some sort of
they've got a server on-prem somewhere.
Technically, I get you're
so
getting
it's
no. Hey, it's all semantics. It's all semantics, Mitchell. Let's not go there.
Well, Well, Mitch brings up a good point. Calling it private cloud, other than trying to lash yourself to the bandwagon of getting on the cloud, is really about taking cloud methodology and pushing it down into the private data center, which works sometimes and doesn't work others. I feel like it works better when your networking department is more like, you know what? Fine, we'll treat you all like customers. Remember chargeback? That's still a thing. But that ultimately becomes the bigger thing. And I think honestly, what we really brought up here, I think what we've really highlighted is that cloud has limitless potential, but also a lot more pitfalls. And as enterprise folks, we're used to the pitfalls. We know what to look for and where the problems are. And stumbling into the brave new world of cloud could be a little harder. And thankfully, we have companies like Aruba that are here to help us, at least from the Wi-Fi and security side. But a lot of it's going to have to be us thinking about our workflows, thinking about our applications, figuring out how those work in a new way. And maybe we'll have a better solution down the road. I can't say that we will, but I hope so.